Houdini 20.5 has added a new cop network, and there are a lot of nodes to play with. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to investigate making a geometry / material brush. And so I had this working a lot faster a few hours ago. I definitely have to make a mode that is optimized so that you can paint interactively, and then switch out once you're committed to a more finely detailed one. Some of the issues I had was painting across seams, and so that's addressed a little bit in the tutorial if I'm using the nodes correctly. This is definitely not a texturing tutorial. I was quite hacky in here with setting up height maps and stuff because I'm just doing look dev, and I just wanted to investigate working in UV space and connecting geometry and textures. In Houdini 20.5, they've added a new COPS setup. And one of the things I found intriguing was how easy it is now to connect 3D view elements in 3D world elements into your texture space. So I'm just grabbing an asset here, pig, and you can bring in your own as long as it has a texture and UVs. And if we look underneath our pig, we can find the path for the color that's being used for texture. And so I'll just edit property that and copy that path. So Control C, and then I'll add a SOP modify here. I often put cops inside of a SOP create because that way I can use, that needs to be called paint, I think. That way I can use the SOP create to render from. But here we'll do a SOP modify because inside of here I'm going to draw my curves on the existing surface, and to do that I need to unpack it first so I have access to the geometry. So I'm going to need a draw curve, and I'm going to need a null after that, and I'll just call this stroke. So good habit, capital out, so we can find stuff, stroke, stroke, and then I will add a new cop network, and inside of there we'll add a file node and bring in that paste, that path that we got from LOPS. And so now we have access to the texture that's being used for the pig. Same thing, I'm going to add a null here, out, and call this out C, I guess. And then I know later on the preview material wants to have RGB, not RGBA. So we'll just do an RGBA to RGB convert here, and also add something to change our texture so that we know it's having an effect back up at the LOPS level. So what we'll do is we'll copy the path to this COPS node here and go all the way back up to LOPS. And here we're going to override that with this path. Make sure you have op in front of your path, and that way now when we look at it, you can see if I pin this view open and go back down inside to COPS and adjust the contrast, you can see here that we are indeed affecting the texture. Alright, so now I want to draw a curve on the surface and bring that into the COPS environment. So let's go up a level here, we'll go to our draw curve and pick the actual geometry here. And if you hit enter, it puts you in draw mode if you're not already in it. And I'll just quickly draw a curve on the surface, maybe something slightly different over the mouth. That looks good. And now I've got that as a null out that I can reference back in COPS. I also, while I'm here, want to add a null for the actual geometry. So I'm just going to do an out geo here. And then between that, just so that the preview material works inside of cops, I'm going to do an attribute delete. And the attribute I want to delete is the USD material path. There we go. And so I'll copy out strokes path here, go into our copnet, and add a SOP import. And we'll use an external SOP, and we want the stroke. So you can see here I'm getting the path inside of cops, and I want to put that stamped over top of my cop network. So let's get a stamp cop and stamp some points. And so we put the geometry into points here, and we can stamp some images or SDFs. So I'll just grab an SDF here, SDF shape, and we'll stick that in there. Let's have a look at what we've got so far. So we've got a circle. Let's change that to line, and then add a bit of thickness. That's too much. Just so we can really see it. You can see that it's not getting any of the orientations relative to the surface yet, and so we'll work on that. But for now, let's just do an over here, and we will over this on our texture, and we'll put that into the foreground and this into the background, and then put that here. And so now we can see what our texture is going to look like with that on there. And you can see that the way it's drawn has nothing to do with the UV layout of our texture. So if we were to grab a preview node, preview material, and we'll put that into our base color, and we'll get pretty much the same result because the preview material also uses a grid, just like the card. And what I want to do is preview it on the actual geometry. So I'll grab another SOP import here, and this time instead we will grab the out of the geo. And so we can look at that and see what we've got. And since we deleted the USD material, we won't see that on there. We'll just see the current UVs and the geometry. We'll plug that into the geo of the preview material. And so now we can see the stamps on our material. So let's go up a level and work on getting them placed correctly in UV and getting their orientations. There's a couple of ways you can do orientation. Obviously, you can do orientation along curve. There's tons of ways to do it. I'm just going to do a simple polyframe here and put the polyframe in front of everything. I could have just dropped it on the node, I guess that would have been easier. But inside of polyframe, I'm just going to change tangent name to up. Stamp points is looking for orient and up and n, and so I believe n, but definitely up. And so I'm just going to set the n and up here, and let's have a look at it. The new view of attributes is amazing inside of Houdini. And the vertices, sorry, the vectors here are way too long. So let's shorten those a bit here. We'll adjust our length scale so you can see what we've got. So here's my ups, and they're aligned with the surface, which is wonderful because we need that, our curve orientations relative to that. And so what I'll do is I will add another polyframe, and add another polyframe after the drawn curve, and I don't need those normals. And so now I've got my ups along the surface here. And then what I need to do is get the actual UVs from my surface. So let's get a ray here. Draw curve doesn't inherit the surface attributes. So what we'll do is we'll stick a ray in here, and we will ray the curve onto that surface. But we're not going to project the rays. We're going to do minimum distance. We're not going to transform the points. And then we're going to import attributes from hits. And the attribute we want is UV, so that now this curve has a location. All these points are in a UV space for our texture. And I also have orientations. So if we go inside a COPS network and look at that now, you can see that we're still not getting what we want. So let's go back up here, and what we're going to do is put the curve into UV space. So I'll use an attribute swap, and I'll just stick that here, and I want to swap UV to P. And so now you can see that my curve is in UV space, right? 0, 0 to 1, 1. And we actually want that to be in -1 to 1, 1 because that's what COPS is expecting. But before we do that, you'll also notice that our ups have not been rotated relative to our UV space. So let's do that. So I'm going to add a wrangle. Sorry, I'm sure there's a simpler way to do it than a wrangle, but it's still only going to be one line of code, so it's not that big a deal. And what I want to do is, let's turn on normals here so you can see what I'm doing. I need to reorient my normals so they're pointed down the z-axis. So I'll just say at n equals, and we will make it equal to 0, 0, 1. And so my normals are facing in this direction. And then what we're going to do is do an attribute reorient. And where is that? There we go. And we are going to use that to reorient our ups based on our normal. So here we'll just go to attribute reorient. And the attribute that we want to reorient is up. And so now you can see my ups are reoriented to the normal. And then one more thing we have to do is do a transform and put the UV space into the size that COPS wants. So I'll translate it down -1, -1, and then I will scale it up by 2. And let's have a look at that. So now you can see, if we look down Z, it is in -1 to 1, 1. We can look at that here more easily from this view here, and we'll do a front view. And you can see here that I'm now in the expected texture size space of COPS, which is -1, -1 to 1, 1. So now when I go into my COP network, and let's have a look at our preview here, and we'll turn off all the attributes that we have on because it's pretty distracting, and turn off points. And you won't see anything, and that's because I'm not referencing the right axis here. So let's look down the z-axis, and you can see now that it is working, that I now have orientation for my curve. And so the problem with this is that where it crosses the UV seams, it breaks up. And the reason being, again, is that if we look at our drawn curve, once it's put into UV space, it jumps across the seams. So to make it a little clearer what the issue is here, I will add, split the UV seams on our geometry and promote that to a point attribute. And then we'll just copy this attribute swap here. And so you can see the UV islands here, and they need to be transformed as well, or we can just look at our points on that. So you can see here that I'm drawing the curve across the pig, and then it jumps to another UV seam and another one and another one. And so it's leaving a line in between them. And we could delete that line by length or delete it by UV island groups or something like that. But the issue is it gets a little complicated getting the line to continue and leave a point at the edge where it needs to, as it leaves one UV island to the next. And it seems to really overcomplicate it in terms of solutions that I've found. Maybe somebody has a better idea. So what we'll do next is look at a way of drawing in a different UV space and then comping that on top of our existing texture. Okay, let's make a new UV set to paint in, because when we paint in this one, we're crossing too many seams. So I'm going to get a UV flatten, and you can make your own UVs this way. And I'll just stick it here after polyframe. And I made one earlier. You can obviously sit here and shift and unwrap your own until you get a layout that you like, that has as few seams or islands as possible. I'm just gonna use a recipe that I made, and you can see it's laid it out now, where I'm probably not gonna paint over too many seams. I'm not going underneath the pig. I'm probably not going behind the ears here. So I just took some time just shift selecting the edges until I got a new UV layout. And I'll save this recipe somewhere for you guys, or just the seam values, or just make your own. And so now what I need to do, I don't need to, but I'll do a UV layout just to fill the space a little better. There it is. And do a UV layout. And I will just set the rotations to 45 degrees. And so now it's filling up the space a little better. And then what I need to do is I need to copy this UV onto our existing geometry. So let's do an attribute copy. And we'll go here, and we want to copy this attribute. And the attribute that we're going to want to copy is a vertex attribute. And we're going to want to copy, let's get this so that it's happier. We're going to want to copy over the UVs and not the CDs. And when we copy it, we're going to want to call it something new. So I'm going to call it UV paint, just so I know this is a UV I want to paint in. And then we'll just stick it, everything out from the polyframe. And then the other thing we need to do is under ray, we need to make sure, I guess I already did it earlier, sorry, is that we also ray the UV point vertice attribute over. And that way, we look at it here, you can see I have both UVs and UV paint to use for my curve. And then down here, attribute swap, instead of UV as my source here, I want to use UV paint as my source. And now you can see we have a nice continuous paint stroke that is, or draw stroke, that is not being interrupted by a UV seam. All right, so we'll go into cops now that we have a new set of UVs, and they would be on our geometry here. So I'm going to add a wrangle to fit the UVs, these UVs into the geometry UVs. So I'll get a wrangle here, and there might be a way to do it without a wrangle, but this seems to work fine. So under my wrangle here, I'm just going to clear all of this and add some geometry here, and RGB, and the binding name will be color or C. And then up here, I'm just going to copy paste the code that I already wrote. It's not hard to remember, but I'd rather copy paste it. and I'll explain it. So what this is doing is I will drag the geometry in here, and then we'll look at it. That's the geometry. And we'll go down here to look at the color output. That is the UV map from UV Paint. And so it's looking in the UV Paint space for the UV values. And so you'll also see that it's in 0, 0 to 1, 1 space. So just like before with the transform node at the SOP level, we will transform this this at the comps level. And so what we'll do is we'll translate this same as before, -1, -1, and then we'll scale it up so it fills the space. And then we'll take this, and we'll use this to do a texture sample of our stamp. So if we go texture sample, and we want to sample this texture, and we want to use these UVs, and then we want to take, actually this says I have an error. I didn't put it in UV space. Let's do an RGB to UV, RGB to UV, stick that in there. And so now that texture is sampled in that UV space, and now we can drag that and put that into our foreground instead. And let's have a look at what that's going to look like. You're going to have some funny issues outside of the seams, which is fine. And now you can see we have an uninterrupted brush stroke across our surface, because we're not crossing the seams with the stroke, and then we're moving it into the other UV space. You will see some issues though still at the endpoints, and that is when we drop our pen or our mouse down. There's usually a bit of jittering as we begin and finish a curve. So we'll just delete a couple of those points with the start end next. Let's get rid of those end points that are a bit odd. What we'll do is we'll make sure we have the up to take a look at, and you can see if I look here at the ray here, that some of these endpoints are pretty funky, and it's just from where I put my mouse down. And so where I'm using a pen often when you first put it down, it'll add a few extra points, or it won't be moving in the intended direction right away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a connectivity SOP, and we'll leave it as is, and we'll do connectivity here by point. It's going to output class as an attribute, and then we're going to do a group by range and stick that in here. And let's look at that group. Right now it's grabbing everything, so let's switch that to points, and let's maybe start and end on something so we can see. And the connectivity is going to be based on class, and it works for one curve right now, but the reason why I'm doing this connectivity is that way I can draw multiple curves, and it won't be, you know, the first couple of points of the first curve and the last couple of points of the last curve. We want it first and last of each curve, so that's how we have this connectivity. And then what I'm going to do is blast that to get rid of those last points. Actually, we'll invert that first. There we go. Then we're only getting the first couple and last points. And we'll blast this. So let's add a blast node here. And we will blast group 1 here. And let's have a look at that. And we'll zoom in here to see what's happening. We'll turn the blast on and off. And you can see it's getting rid of the endpoints. And if we go and look at the up vector on that, actually let's just go here. You can see that it's now looking pretty good, but without that blasted, you get this funky last point. All right, so let's compare this to some copies that we might put along this curve. So I'm going to do a copy points, and the points we want to copy to are these ones, and I've got nothing copied to it. Let's just get a line. We'll make an actual staple in a second, but this is fine. So we'll just take a line and look what we get when we do copy to point. So that's kind of crazy, so let's try a different direction here. And, oops, sorry, 1 and 0. And that is still, yeah, that's probably aligned. And we'll change the length to like maybe point, I don't know, 0.6. No, that's crazy. Okay, still too long. Something 0.6 maybe? Yeah, there you go. So we'll change that length, and the origin will move half of that over. So 0.3. There we go. And the reason I did that is so that you can see the lines are now halfway across the curve here. And so what we'll do is make an out node for that, and we'll go out. Nope, sorry, null. And it's been a long week, sorry. And we'll call this out staples. And this is really not the staple yet, but that's fine. And we'll save that and go up a level here. And let's have a look at our staples on top of this. So we'll go sop create here. Just add this down here. Call this staples. And inside of that, we're going to object merge that in. So I'll copy this path, and inside of here, let's just do an object merge, and we'll get that path and into this object. And now when we go up a level here, we have our staples that are a little hard to see. So let's lock this open and do a couple things. Let's go into paint, into cops, and we will make this line a little shorter. And obviously we just raster the staple geometry onto the surface. That would match up a little better, but I find it's a little less clean. We're going to take a look at that method in a second. And then lower the thickness a bit here. There we go. And you can see that it's kind of pixelated. So you can raise the resolution of the entire comp network. I'm just going to do it right here temporarily and stick a resample node here. And I'm going to up the resolution by 4, and that smooths out the stamp marks quite a bit. The staple lines are still inside of the surface, but at least you can see that they are aligned, which is the whole point of this, is that the geometry and the stamps are aligned to each other. So let's go to the line here, and we will move it off the surface a bit. I don't know whether I want X or Y. See, there we go. So now the staples are slightly off the surface, and you can see here that it aligns. Now, something to note is that when I made my UV map, not all of the UVs were perfectly square, so in the texture. So that's why you're going to get a little bit of misalignment here, and so that's kind of important that you make a good UV map. All right, so I've just cleaned up the cop network a little bit, so we can add some more nodes in between. Back in our geometry setup for cops, we currently have out staples, and we have out stroke, and they are aligned with each other, which is great. But we need to make a staple, and then I'm thinking instead of outstroke, let's call this stitches, because it'll make more sense to use this for stitches later. Stitches. There we go. Stitches. All right, so we'll use this for stitches, and this might seem a lot of extra work, just to stop here for a minute to orient our ups here. So let's have a look at our ups on our surface here. And you'd think, like, well, why do this? Why don't we just do an oriented curve or a polyframe down here after we're in UV space, and then use that to draw? And it's much simpler, and we can do that. But there will be times when your ups are not just, everything's not just perfectly aligned to the curve and its normals are to the surface. Maybe the normals are being oriented by something else, or your ups, and or animated, and so you do need to rotate these into UV space. So that's what this setup is for. For the staples, it'll be much more simple. So we just need the points where the staples intersect with the surface, and then we're going to stamp that. So let's make a staple, and I'll get a circle, and let me see here, circle. And I'm just using a circle because it's easier just to make an open arc really quick. And we'll have a look at it here, and it's not oriented correctly. 220, 225, yep, 225. And I'm doing that so that the point numbers 0 and 3 are at the bottom, so the last edge is on the bottom. And then what I want to do is poly bevel this, so we get the little rounded corners that you get on a staple. So I'll just stick a poly bevel here. Cool. And before we select anything, I just want to make sure that we're in points mode. We're not. So points mode, and select the top 2 points and hit enter. And then let's just bevel that in a bit and round it a bit. And now we have something starting to look like a staple. We need to get rid of that bottom edge. So we'll just dissolve that away. And it should go into edge mode, but let's just make sure anyway. And we'll stick that into dissolve. And then we will pick the bottom edge. So I'll just pick this edge here, hit enter. And again, make sure your circle is an open arc for that to work. And so now if I stick, it's not a staple, it's the spine for my staple. So now when I stick that into copy to points and have a look at it, it's huge, and so we need to make it smaller. And I think it's also not oriented correctly. So let's add a transform node, and just stick that in here. And we will scale this way down until we have a nice staple size. And you can see it's flat on the surface, so let's rotate it 90 degrees. And let's go back to, let's just template this and show our surface so we can see it together. And yeah, we can see our staples are on the surface, and they are aligned with the stamp underneath, which is great. All right, so now what I want to do is to affect our texture where our staples are interacting with the surface. I'm going to get those points. So let's group our staple points. So I'll just stick a group here and group all of them, and I'll call these staple curve points, and make sure that we're doing it on points. And so now I have grouped all of those points. And then what I'm going to do is Boolean this Boolean by curve this to the surface. And I want the surface from up here. So now we are Booleaning it. It's a bit messy, so let's just go Alt-click here on the wire and move that over there just to keep it from getting cluttered. And so now we Boolean that curve. And then what I want to do is split it out. And I just want the points that where the intersection is. So I put a split here, and I pick that group staple curve points, and I add a null here just to see what's happening on our split, and review that, and look at the points. You can see here that I am just getting the end points here, the points where the staple intersects with the surface. Now, just as an aside here, we might do it later, but I could run polygons along these points where the staples are, and then rasterize that into cops and use that as a mask to affect my texture. So that is yet another way to bring your geometry from your surface to create or modify a texture. All right, so but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to stamp the ends here, which is just about the easiest way to do this. So I'm just going to call this out, out staples. Staple points, I should be better, so that I know it's where it's interacting with the surface. Let's make use of these staple points in cops. So I'll go inside of our cop network here, and I'm going to just copy this group because it's already set up. And what we want to get is we want to get those points that we made, so staple points. And so now you can see that I am indeed bringing those in. Let's just look at the points that it's using. And the shape I'm going to stamp to that will be a circle. I'm just going to make it a lot smaller for edges. You can see what I did here. And then we're going to stamp those points. And I'm going to stamp black. And you can see there's an issue here. It's not in UV space, it's in 3D space, so it's just shooting down Z. And so what I'm going to do is raster setup here, and we will raster set up to UVs. And you can see it's in our standard UVs, but we've been using UV paint that we made, so UV paint. And so now you can see they're in UV paint. But they're also still kind of funny. So in stamp, it's using the rotations, and I don't want any. If I just sprite this once it's on UV space, it will just face right down the Z. That looks a lot better already. And then under stamp, let's just scale this down. I'm not getting my staple points. I seem to be just getting the line that the staple points are on. So let's address that. Let's go up here, and yeah, I'm just getting the UVs from the copy that the staples are being copied to. So I need to get a ray here, and I will ray to my surface. And under my ray, I just want minimum distance. I don't want to transform the points. And again, I want the attributes UV and UV paint. And now you can see that my staple points are looking pretty good. So let's just verify that that is lining up. So under stamp points here, let's just stick this into our texture sample here. And so we know that it's being moved into the other UV space, and that's being put over our pig. And then look at our preview material and turn off points because it's kind of hard to look at. And go up a level here, and we will template our staples instead of staple points. And you can see the staples and the textured stamps are now lining up, which is great. Okay, let's use this mat that we made, stamp mat, to affect our texture rather than just slapping it on top. We'll take the original texture and make it the background, and then we'll take this new sort of bloody looking texture and put it on top. And then I want to use this as a mat somehow here. So what I'll do is I could texture sample it all at the end. or anywhere actually. It really doesn't matter where I textual sample this mat. But let's just get a over here, and I'm going to put this over a constant layer here, and it'll just be white. Oops. Okay. So this is on top of this, and I've got a nice looking mat now. I need to invert it, so I'll just invert that. And now I've got the opposite for a mat, and then I just need to do a mono. And so I'll do RGBA to mono. I'm going to stick that in here. And so now I've got a mat that I can use, and I'll stick my mat in here instead. And that's now in our UV paint space. Stick that in mask, look at our over, and then look at our preview of our 3D model. And we can see here now that we've got sort of our bloody texture showing through or over our current texture. But it's pretty clean looking, so let's break it up a little bit. You could damage, you could spread it. I'm going to go for more of a spread, so let's do a distort by slope here. And I'll stick that in here. And it's going to get kind of angry because I don't have a direction yet that I am distorting it by. So let's create something we can use here. We'll get a 3D fractal noise. Yeah, 3D fractal noise, and we'll shove that in there. And now it's less cranky, but it's pretty crazy looking. So let's maybe change some of the values here on this till we get something that we could use. Maybe make the element size a lot bigger because I want to spread it a certain amount. Purlin's a little better. There we go. And my slope dir should probably be different value. And I picked this up from Scott or Waffle Boy or somebody. I don't know. Somebody at Side Effects demoed that. And that's spreading way too far. So let's lower the scale quite a bit here. Maybe 0.2 if I can get to it on the slider. I can't. And then let's streak that. All right, I'm getting something now that looks like sort of blood under skin or damaged skin or something like that. It looks a little small though, so I will, where is it here, stamp point, and I'm just gonna up our point. I mean, that's too big for our staples. I just want a little bit here. I could also do like use this as the sort of damaged skin with the blood, and then put something black dots or something a lot clearer, exactly where the staples are. So I might come back and do that. But let's have a preview of what this looks like. So save it and go up a level here, and you can see my staples are now affecting the surface. And I got too many staples, so let's add a resample node here, and being procedural and everything. And I know I can just add it at the bottom of the node instead of piping it into everything, but just a creature of habit. So, all right, so now with my resample node, I can change how many staples there are along the surface. We'll just reduce that. And while I'm here, I think I need to, while I'm here, let's get, let me see. Yeah, let's get this curve, and I want to take the actual curve, and let's use that. Let's get a null here, and we're going to call this scar, out scar, and that will be the path, obviously, for our scar here. So let's just stick this out here. I want to add another resample, and this resample is going to be just for the scar line, and this other resample will be for the stitches we're going to do later, and for the staple placement. So let's have a look at just the scar here, and we'll change the resample so it's filled in quite a bit. And I can, rasterize this inside of cops, but I may as well just do it here. So let's do an attribute swap to put it in the paint UV space. And then let's transform that so it's in texture space here. There we go. So now we can use out scar. So I'll go into cops here, and let's get our scar points. So I will copy this group here and just reuse that. And let's put that down here. And I am SOP importing out scar. Perfect. And let's have a look at it, make sure we're getting it. Yep, there's our scar. And then the shape, let's put some circles on it. And let's go to stamp points. And stamp points, we can just do sprite because I don't need any rotation, so it's straight down Z of UV. And then I'm going to severely lower the scale of this. And stamp color is going to be black again. Just crank this down here. Oh, and then the circle is like way too big. I hate that. It leaves a lot of edges. So let's do that. And then we will up the scale. There we go. So, it's a little bumpy. If I wanted to rasterize a line, I don't think there's a way currently to do that in COPS. I think you only rasterize polygons. You could sweep something along this as a polygon, like a ribbon with a sweep, and rasterize that. I have a COP OCL cop that I made somewhere that will make SDFs from lines that I might post soon. I got to dig it up somewhere. So that'll take a line and turn it into an SDF like this circle or a line, and then that way it'll fill in nicely. And being an SDF, there's a lot you can do with it. All right, so let's take this scar, and we're going to treat it the same way that we did up here with the points through the distort. And what we're going to do is move everything a little over to the side here so we got some room. And I'll move this over here. And the reason why is we're going to do an over. So let's do an over of these two elements. And we'll just put this one over this one here and have a look at it. And we've got the two of them together, and they're being distorted together. So I'm going to take the stamp we have down here for the scar, and I'm going to give it a different amount of distort. So first I'll just do a dilate erode and make it a little smaller. So let's stick that in here, have a look at it, and that's making it bigger. I want to make it kind of tiny, and then I'm going to also distort it and stick this in there. And that's a little crazy, so let's remove the streak and let's lower the amount quite a bit that we are displacing this by. And maybe we'll do it, yeah, let's just leave it like that, just to change it up a bit from the existing curve. And then what I'm going to do is just stick that in another over here. So let's move everything over to make some room here. And we'll add another over here. And this over will be this one combined with this new line. So let's have a look at that. Oops, sorry, I put that in mask. Boom. Bye. Okay. So now we've got the line, the darker line in there. Might have gone the wrong way with distort. Let me see here. Yeah. So that line is now added to all of this, which is great. So now if I were to go and have a look at everything, you can see here that it's a little stronger in the line. All right, just to save on time, because the point of this was to sort of do an R&D into different ways to rasterize from world space to UV space with stamping and restoration of geometry and orientations, etc. So I've just gone and added this, and I'll explain what I've done. You can see now that there's a height map. One thing that's kind of helpful is to put your view into wire, and you can see what's negative and what's positive relative to the map, which is kind of useful. And the way I created the height map is I took the existing map here and I overed it over well, I remapped it so it was kind of dull, and overed it over a constant map of 0.5, which is right in the middle, 0 to 1. Obviously, I retexture sampled it again back to where our UV paint UVs are. And then here's something kind of tricky here. I'll just copy paste this so you can see. If you go and look for the file for the pig, you can actually see the other textures that are available here. So I just found there was a spec file there. And so I used that, I remapped it just to dull it down quite a bit, which you can barely see. Overed it over that, monoed it, and then just set the equalize back to 0, which is like the center for height, black negative, white positive, and then ran that into out H. And then back up at the lops level, I added a quick surface material for, you just do, tab material, quick surface material, add your material, and then what you want to do is take your paths from your output. So I'd copy this, so Control C on my height map, and then I would go into quick surface material here and go down to where my height is and paste it in. But make sure that you put op in front of it. You can see it's not reading anything right now. So make sure you put op in front of that, and now it's going to read the height map. So back inside, you can see my GPU is cranking. Anyway, back inside, I also took this spec and did an over with the inverted stitching and marks, and used that to drive the roughness, and also non-inverted to drive the specular. And the reason for that is I wanted it shiny where it's bloody and scarred, and not shiny outside of there. And then while we're here, I also just took a ramp, and then just dropped it off on the sides. Used the same distort that I was using for the staple marks and blood, and out stapled that. So same thing, I just Control C that, and then went up a level here and made a quick material for the staples and pasted that into the color map. So all I do is go set or create. When you first come in here, it'll say nothing. So what you want to do is do set or create and then just paste it in and put op in front of it, and now it's going to read your staple map. And then after that, just a material linker. You have to get your objects that you want it on. So in this case, I just left it as quick surface material 2 and just drag it over to mesh. I didn't really need a second one. The point being is that now the materials are linked with the correct surface material. Two other things before we finish, and then I'll do the stitches, I guess, in part 2, is in inside of staples, the way that I made the staples was we object merged in the spine for it. I deleted everything because if you don't, it's going to bring in UVs and normals and all kinds of stuff. So I just blew it all away. Got a circle and made it a square and transformed it until it was really tiny, and then just a sweep on the staples, and I made sure on the sweep that I was computing UVs, so I had some nice UVs along there. I also made sure to squish when I was creating the texture, because I wanted sort of to represent something anisotropic. So two more things before I finish. I did set my comp to 1024. It seemed to create something reasonable. Also the bump will blur at the edges. If you get too high, it gets crisp, and the texture is 512, 512, and I'm not going to be close up to the pig if it looks like that, so I just figured that was about the right size. Anyway, if you use this method of wrangle and UV sampling it, I'm looking at UV sampling at the SOPs level next, and then caching it out. That should make it a lot faster, but this really slows it down. You can't paint real time on the surface or close to it with this on, but you can if you do this. You can paint more interactively. I'm not going to say real time, it still has some sampling issues. If you just save out, you don't need the null, I just like it, I would call it out something. And then with a ROP image writer here, I just save it out as whatever, some kind of EXR or something, and then just file read it back in. And just this break really speeds up your COPS graph and ability to draw curves on your character and see them update and not stagger. And another way to do it is to not worry about switching, work in this UV space, but not have to transfer it later. And the way to do that is to so I made this UV paint layout that we saw earlier, where I don't have many seams, whereas previously I had seams I didn't want to paint over. And so I've got this new UV layout, and then this is your typical workflow for Labs Maps Baker, and you just bake out the diffuse color of the pig, and then bring that texture back into paint on top of that. And that the pixels from that will now be in the UV paint space, so you won't have to do any kind of translation inside of COPS.